You're listening to an Ono Media podcast.
Good morning, and thanks for joining me for Rise in Crime, your morning caffeine hit all about crime. I'm Mama Jules, and I've got several stories for you today, including 2 updates to cases I brought you in Monday's episode. But let's start with this one, because it includes a camel bite, mushrooms, and a reality TV star. Today's bizarre arrest is brought to you by TLC's reality TV show, 1,000 Pound Sisters. And to be completely transparent, I've never seen a single episode of this show. But I have the internet, so I can tell you all about the weight loss journey of Amy Slatton Halterman and her sister Tammy Slatton. But they're both from Dixon, Kentucky. Now, the 1,000 Pound Sisters program kicked off in 2020, and it's got 5 seasons that include 47 episodes. And it appears the show mostly films the day-to-day activities of 2 sisters that are struggling with morbid obesity. The show chronicles the severe health circumstances, including hospitalization, and then Amy's pregnancy, their brushes with death, and then weight loss surgery. The show was picked up by TLC after Tammy and Amy started a YouTube channel. Producers were intrigued and also entertained by how Amy and Tammy interacted with each other. According to Cheat Sheet, fans especially love the honesty that's shared between the sisters, and fans also have become invested in their weight loss journey. As the seasons progressed, the Slatton extended family members became more involved in the filming. Tammy and Amy were primarily raised by their grandmother due to a strained relationship with their mother, Darlene, and Darlene occasionally makes appearances on the reality show. Then there's Amy and Tammy's brother, Chris, and his sister, Misty, and Amy and Tammy's sister, Amanda, which that sounds all weird, right? Because aren't they all related? Well, yes, they do love each other, but the dynamics are kind of red hot between them, and that includes who is actually blood related to whom. So where does the camel bite and the mushrooms come into play? Well, over the Labor Day holiday, Amy took her 2 children to a Tennessee safari park. And you know these kind of places. This is one of those where you drive through the park in your car and the animals are visible and they even sometimes come up to the car. I have a Yellowstone themed version of this kind of a park in my area. It's about 20 minutes from my house. And in that park, there's dozens of bears and elk and buffalo, and you drive around and you get to see them and you can even feed some of them. Well, this park is safari themed and it has 7.5 miles of giraffes and wallabies and kookaburras and cranes, foxes, antelopes, sloths, and then there's camels. And during guest hours, the Crockett County Sheriff's Office received a call on Labor Day saying someone had been bitten by a camel. When deputies arrived and approached the car holding the victim, it wasn't the bite that made their spidey senses go off. It was the suspicious odor coming from Amy's car. Authorities say the car reeked of marijuana, and when it was searched, they also found mushrooms inside. Also inside the car, Amy's 2 children. And then who else is in the car? Brian Lavorne. That's Amy's new friend. Well, all of that comes on the heels of the reality TV show because Amy divorced her husband, Michael, last year, and she admitted on 1,000 Pound Sisters that her mental health was the worst it had ever been since divorcing Michael. The Crockett County deputies arrested Amy and charged her with child endangerment and drug possession because weed is not legal in Tennessee. Brian also faces the same charges. The Crockett County Sheriff's Office also couldn't help but poke fun by titling their press release, "From Feeding a Camel to the Slammer." Now, back in December, Amy told E! News that although her love life has had ups and downs, she can always count on her family, especially Tammy. And on Tuesday, just one day after Amy's arrest, Tammy posted a video on Instagram about her self-reflection and her growth through the 5 seasons, but she didn't even reference Amy's arrest. So here's what I can't find an answer to. Was there really even a camel bite? Because the owner of the safari park, his name's John Connolly, well, he is vehemently denying the camel bite. He told The Blast that a camel has never become aggressive at the park before, and now all of a sudden a camel's becoming aggressive with Amy. He also said the cut above Amy's elbow could not be linked to a camel bite because the skin was filleted open and cleanly cut. He reasoned that a camel would bruise and rip the skin with his teeth. Now, the owner did verify that Amy was the one who received medical treatment before the arrest was made. It has yet to be verified whether or not Amy and Brian have made bail, and when this podcast went to production, I couldn't tell you the answer to that. So we'll just have to wait and see. I will bring you more information as it becomes available. And now to this story, which is still breaking news, you guys, so I'll bring you the details that are available. Now, the University of Wisconsin is in Whitewater, and it's a Division III school with 12,000 students. The college has 2 campuses, and on their website, they brag about the low cost of attending the 4-year university. Now, when it comes to sports, the men have 11 to choose from, and the women have 13. And it was 2 athletes that had been dating that broke the hearts of students all over campus on Friday. 21-year-old Kara Welsh from Plainfield, Illinois, was a national champion gymnast for the Warhawks. She won an individual title on the vault in 2023, and she was a 2-time All-American. She's truly one of the most decorated gymnasts in school history. Her love interest? 23-year-old Chad Richards, who wrestled for the Warhawks his freshman and sophomore years. Now, it does appear he's still enrolled at the university, and that's when Chad and Kara had some sort of altercation on Friday night at Kara's off-campus apartment building, where it seems that Chad was helping Kara move in to prepare for her upcoming senior year. Shots were fired during the altercation, and police were called. When they arrived, Chad was alive and present, but Kara had been shot multiple times and mortally wounded. After questioning Chad, police arrested him, and on Tuesday, Chad appeared in court, charged with first-degree intentional homicide, endangering safety by use of a deadly weapon, and also disorderly conduct. His bail has been set at $1 million. Now, there's also a stipulation placed on that bail that if he does get released from jail, he would not be allowed to set foot on campus and could only stay in contact with the university via phone or electronic device. Now, I'm bringing you this podcast on Thursday, and Chad is due in court again on Friday. We have so much more to learn about this case. And for me, it's mostly the why. Was it just a bad fight? Was there more involved here? And also, I want to know, were there roommates, neighbors? Who heard this altercation? Who called 911? I am obviously following this one, and I will let you know more as more becomes available. And now an update to the European Doberman breeder out of Colorado that was found dead on his property by his friends last week. So just a quick reminder, in case you missed the last episode of Rise in Crime, 57-year-old Paul Peavy was a beloved community member and dog breeder in the mountain town of Idaho Springs. Paul was well known to the community, and when he hadn't been heard from for days, his good friend Bruce asked the cops to do a welfare check. They weren't all that serious about Bruce's claim that Paul hadn't been heard from. So they waited until the next day to kind of mosey on up to the 110 acres of Paul's property. The deputy did a cursory check, and he reported back that he found nothing. No Paul and no signs of problems. But Bruce wasn't satisfied. And so he gathered more than 40 members of the community and conducted his own search, which lasted only minutes because Paul was found dead under some logs and leaves and debris just 30 yards from the outbuildings on the property. And the scene really wasn't okay. Doors had been left ajar, items were strewn about, the place was ransacked, at least according to Bruce. And missing from the property were 10 precious Doberman puppies. When I brought you the story on Monday, police were asking that people who had purchased a Doberman from Paul in just the last few months, well, they wanted them to contact the authorities to see if they could generate any information about this murder. You guys, it worked, because 36-year-old Sergio Ferrer is being held on charges of first-degree murder and aggravated robbery. His bail has been set at $1 million, cash only. So here's what authorities are saying about the murder and about how they found Sergio. Paul was last heard from on August 19th. He was reported missing by his friends days later. Deputies went to his residence on August 22nd. Authorities are saying, per the affidavit, that they did not find Paul during that first search, but that they did find his camper door open, and they also found 2 adult Dobermans unattended. The deputy gathered the animals and dropped them at a shelter because there was no food or water that seemed to be available for the dogs. Then, on August 24th, that's when superhero Bruce took matters into his own hands and he organized the search party. It was from that search party that authorities got their big break, not just finding Paul's body, because one of the men who found Paul told detectives that he knew Sergio was selling Doberman puppies on his Facebook page. That same man said he had tried to reach Paul multiple times on his cell phone, and on one of those occasions, someone actually answered the phone, but it wasn't Paul. Instead, he said the person appeared to be attempting a fake accent. Now, he told authorities his gut was telling him that that was Sergio on the phone. The same man who's now turning into a wealth of knowledge, well, that same guy says he knew items were definitely missing from Paul's property. He said things that were missing were jewelry, weapons, and metal detectors. Authorities immediately reached out to the Georgetown police, where Sergio lives, and they asked if they could look into this fella. Well, guess what? Sergio already had an outstanding warrant for an unrelated charge, and he was arrested that day and held while police gathered more evidence from the crime scene and also while they executed a search warrant at Sergio's house. So here's what they found in his home: 2 pepper ball guns, a black bag filled with jewelry, 4 metal detectors, and Paul's cell phone. Investigators also found some of Sergio's clothing that had blood stains on the articles, and then weirdly, they also found some disposable wipes that were also found at Paul's home. They were matching. Okay, loaded with all of this evidence, authorities asked Sergio how he came to have all of this stuff that looked to be Paul's. Sergio had multiple answers. His first response: that the metal detectors belonged to a man named Jared. Well, they asked for Jared's number, and Sergio actually gave it to them. So, of course, they called Jared, and he's like, nah, I know nothing about any metal detectors. Then Sergio voluntarily told authorities that Paul had gifted him a rifle BB gun. And then he later said Paul also sold him 2 pistol BB guns, 2 rifle BB guns, and a 9mm handgun. Sergio then went on to explain that he had visited Paul's property on August 19th. All right, remember, that's the last day his friends had heard from him. Sergio said the visit was so that he could make a final payment for one of the puppies, which, by the way, fetch about $4,000 each. Sergio said when he arrived, he found that the place was a total mess and that he took numerous items from the property. So in this version, he's copying to being a thief. He said, per the affidavit, that he saw an opportunity and he seized it. He did, however, clarify that he didn't do anything to Paul. Authorities wanted to know why he didn't call the police, and Sergio said it was because of that pesky, outstanding warrant. Now, the back and forth between Sergio and the detectives went on for quite a while, with him changing details until he finally said this: okay, I did shoot Paul, but only because Paul pointed a gun at me. Now, Sergio is claiming self-defense. He claimed that Paul was involved with the drug cartel and that the dispute between them was actually centered around missing drugs and not around Doberman puppies. Well, the affidavit says Sergio went on to claim he never sold any of Paul's dogs and that he took all 9 and gave them away in Denver. But that isn't working, since a woman had heeded the direction by the police, and she had actually called the authorities after she took her newly purchased Doberman puppy to the vet. That vet checked the microchip that had been placed by Paul's vet, and that's how they tracked that dog back to Paul's stolen litter. Now, that woman said she bought the puppy on August 21st from a man and a young girl, supposedly Sergio. She only paid $750 for that puppy using Cash App to an account with Sergio's last name on it. And remember that Sergio is saying 9 puppies, but there were 10 puppies. Well, that part of the mystery was solved when another woman came forward and said she had paid for her puppy from Paul just hours before the alleged murder at his property. Sergio goes on, according to the affidavit, to dig an even deeper hole when he was presented with the autopsy results. The coroner's office confirmed Paul died from a gunshot wound and bullet fragments from a 9mm were recovered from his body. Sergio must have been feeling the heat because when he asked if the fragments would match the 9mm gun they found at his house, Sergio responded with, "I took the wrong effing weapon." Well, it's not looking good for Sergio. So what about the somewhat botched investigation by the police in the early hours of the report of Paul's disappearance? In a public apology, the sheriff of Clear Creek County acknowledged that the department's initial response to a recent death investigation was, quote, "not acceptable." And he shared that an internal investigation was underway. Sheriff Matthew D. Harris said the investigation failed to meet the expected professional standards. Here's the exact statement that he supplied to the public. "When I was appointed as your sheriff, I promised transparency, professionalism, accountability, and a review of our policies and practices to improve our calls for service." Then the statement continues like this. "I promised to communicate our success, but to also acknowledge and report our shortcomings. We have made many improvements and changes at all levels of the sheriff's office, but we still have a lot of work to do. Unfortunately, during our initial assessment upon the report of a missing person last Wednesday, our response failed to meet our professional standards. In short, how we handled the initial call is not acceptable." I'm not sure how much this soothes the feelings of the 40-plus friends of Paul Peavy who had to discover his body just yards from his outbuilding. And now another update to the Nudist Colony story I brought you on Monday, and plenty has been uncovered in the last few days. When the podcast went to production last week, 62-year-old Michael Royce Sparks had been arrested for the murders of 79-year-old Daniel Menard and 73-year-old Stephanie Menard. The two were neighbors in the quiet Olive Dell Ranch Nudist Colony in San Bernardino County. The couple had been reported missing, and after several days, when the police arrived to search the couple's home, they found their cell phones on the counter and their car down the block unlocked. Their white Shih Tzu named Cuddles was also missing. While they were searching the home, a tip came in to the police indicating that Menard's next-door neighbor, Michael Royce Sparks, had some sort of beef with the Menards. The three were fighting over a tree that separated the properties. It's alleged the three were fighting over a tree that separated the properties. Well, that tip was from a very reliable source, a family member who had spoken to Sparks recently. That family member said Sparks was suicidal and that he admitted to killing 2 people. Now, a neighbor, Tammy Wilkerson, told multiple outlets that Sparks hated the Menards and that Sparks wasn't quiet about it. He had told multiple people, according to Tammy, that he hated the couple. Armed with that information, the authorities used tactical equipment to enter Sparks' home. They discovered that Sparks was hiding in a 5-foot-deep concrete space underneath that home. The district attorney referred to the space as a homemade basement. When officers made contact with Sparks, who was armed and barricaded, he attempted to shoot himself, but the gun misfired. After lengthy negotiations, Sparks surrendered voluntarily. Once authorities determined the property was safe to search, they discovered human remains under the trailer. Police indicated that they have yet to identify the remains, but that they are assuming the 2 bodies are that of the Menards. KTLA-5 is also reporting that additional remains were found at the property, but those remains have not been linked to any missing persons case currently. Authorities are stating that they don't have an official motive, so maybe it wasn't the tree, maybe it wasn't the hatred, maybe it was just an opportunity to kill. If there are more remains, maybe a motive wasn't necessary when it comes to Sparks. And let's finish with this quick story out of Naples, Florida, that started with a couple apparently cutting off another car in traffic. And then some sort of drunk road rage ensued. The couple just continued on home as the angry driver followed. And that angry driver allegedly was drunk and is also the mayor of Naples. Her name is Teresa Heitman. But she didn't just follow the couple home. She drove over their mailbox and onto their lawn. Here, I'm just going to have you listen to these excerpts from the 911 call.
911, what is the emergency?
Yeah, I think the mayor is drunk, and she just literally up, and she just drove over our mailbox.
The mayor did? All right, did she ever tell you her name or anything like that?
What is your name, ma'am?
Mayor Teresa Heitman.
Now, the 61-year-old mayor of the seaside city did not identify herself at first when she was talking to the driver, but when the man placed the 911 call, they were trying to figure out who she was, and the woman proudly stated she's the mayor. But that attitude didn't last long. When the police showed up and conducted a field sobriety test, she demanded that they not refer to her as her title. Here, listen to that portion of the body cam footage.
Said, Mayor, will you come on over here?
No, don't call me mayor.
Okay.
I am Teresa Heitman right now.
Okay.
I am not the mayor.
Fortunately, right now, you are going to be placed under arrest for driving under the influence of alcohol, okay?
Now, the officer goes on to tell the mayor she is slurring her words. Yet the mayor says she's not slurring her words and that she has sat there calmly while officers conducted the investigation. Well, the officer tells the mayor that calmly is a loose term and that she had yelled at the officers twice since they arrived. Now, during the questioning, the mayor claimed she had only had one glass of wine before getting behind the wheel. And I'm just going to deviate here for a second. I don't drink, but this seems to be the go-to anytime anyone is pulled over drunk. They say they've had one alcoholic beverage. It's just I say this. Like, is that in some sort of directory when you drink at a bar? If you get pulled over by cops, you only say I had one beverage, because it seems to be that's the go-to for everybody who I report on who is drunk driving. And that's exactly what this mayor said, that she had only had one glass of wine. But she also allegedly, she wouldn't let go of the idea that the couple had cut her off in traffic. She kept repeating as if this is a valid excuse for her behavior because that couple had cut her off. Now, once she was arrested and driven to the detention center, 2 different tests to determine her blood alcohol content were administered. In one test, she registered a 0.155, and in another, she registered a 0.169. The legal limit in Florida is 0.08. Now, the mayor was released after posting a $500 bond. The city manager told WTVJ that city employees were saddened to learn about the incident involving the mayor, but they understood that this is a difficult time for Mayor Heitman and that they will give her the space she needs. All right, that's your Thursday episode of Rise in Crime. Thank you so much for being here. If you're loving this, please share it with a friend. Also, like and follow us on all of our social media channels and leave a comment. I love to hear what you have to think about these updated crime stories. And a quick side note about Oh No Media. It's merch day for Peyton Moreland's podcast, Into the Dark. So if you're a listener of that, make sure you jump on board with that merch drop and make sure you like and follow those podcasts as well, Murder with My Husband and Into the Dark. I will see you again on Monday for more morning crime news. I'm Mama Jules, and be safe out there.